The Phalian Alliance. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with fear. Ambassador Krell of the Vorthan Empire stood before the assembled delegates, his blue skin pale with worry. The holographic display behind him showed red zones spreading across star maps like a disease. The Devourers have taken another system, he announced. The Altair colony is gone. 3 billion souls vanished in 2 days. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Representatives from dozens of species spoke at once, their translators creating a chaos of overlapping languages. The Devourers, a machine race from beyond the galactic rim, had been unstoppable for 6 months now. They consumed everything. Planets, ships, even stars themselves, converting matter into more of their kind. General Thak, a massive reptilian from the warrior world of Drakmor, slammed his clawed fist on the table. The Death World Alliance has failed, he roared. Our strongest fighters, our most brutal warriors, our deadliest weapons. Nothing stops them. The Death World Alliance had been their greatest hope. Forged from the most dangerous planets in the galaxy, it brought together species that had evolved in the harshest conditions imaginable. The acid-breathing toxins from their volcanic world. The radiation-immune Christek from their radioactive homeworld. The pressure-resistant deep ones from ocean worlds where the surface pressure could crush steel. Ambassador Vera, a tall humanoid from the ice world of Frostheim, spoke with her usual cold precision. We lost the entire 7th battle fleet yesterday. The toxin doom ships couldn't even scratch their hulls. The Christek radiation cannons had no effect. Even our most powerful gravity bombs barely slowed them down. Commander Brix of the insectoid hive worlds clicked his mandibles nervously. My swarm fighters attacked in waves of 10,000. The Devourers simply absorbed them. We're not fighting an enemy, we're feeding one. In the back of the chamber, a small group sat quietly. They were humans from a small blue world called Earth, recently discovered and barely noticed by the greater galactic community. Earth wasn't even considered for the Death World Alliance. Their planet seemed too mild, too peaceful. No extreme temperatures, reasonable gravity, breathable atmosphere. Their representative, Captain Blake, was a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired eyes. What about the newcomers? Asked Ambassador Krell, gesturing toward the humans. Earth, wasn't it? Do you have any weapons we haven't tried? The chamber fell silent. Several species made sounds that might have been laughter. Captain Blake stood slowly, his simple gray uniform looking plain among the elaborate armor and exotic forms around him. We have a fleet, he said quietly. General Thak snorted. A fleet? We've thrown everything at them. Dreadnoughts the size of cities. Battleships with weapons that can crack moons. What could your little ships possibly do? Blake's expression didn't change. Our ships are different. Different how? Ambassador Vera asked, her voice skeptical. Blake was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. They're built by survivors. The room buzzed with confusion. Ambassador Krell leaned forward. Survivors of what? Everything. Blake replied. Our species didn't evolve on one kind of dangerous world. We survived every kind of danger. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. Floods that covered continents. Diseases that killed half our population. Wars that lasted decades. We didn't specialize in surviving one thing. We learned to survive anything. Commander Brix clicked dismissively. That makes you generalists, not specialists. The Devourers need focused, overwhelming force. Blake shook his head. No, they need something they haven't encountered before. Every species here evolved to handle one specific threat perfectly. But humans learn to adapt to any threat, to find weaknesses where others see only strength, to keep fighting when victory seems impossible. The chamber was silent now. Blake continued, his voice growing stronger. You see our world as peaceful because we made it peaceful. We tamed it. But that took thousands of years of fighting everything that wanted to kill us. Weather, animals, diseases, each other, And worst of all, despair. We're the only species here that nearly destroyed itself and chose to step back from the edge. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of creatures that had dismissed his people as weaklings. The devourers consume matter and energy, but they've never fought a species that was forged by something stronger than physics or chemistry or biology. They've never fought a species that was forged by the choice to survive when survival seemed meaningless. Blake sat down. Give us permission to deploy our fleet, and we'll show you what humans do when everything else has failed. The chamber remained silent, but something had changed. For the first time in months, there was hope. The human fleet. 3 days later, the human fleet arrived at the contested Vega system, where the devourers had just begun consuming the outer planets. The gathered alien observers watched from a safe distance, their instruments trained on the approaching Earth vessels. Admiral Voss of the Death World Alliance shook his massive head as the readings came in. I don't understand, he growled to his aide. Their ships are so small. Indeed, compared to the massive dreadnoughts and city-sized battle stations the Alliance had deployed, the human fleet looked almost fragile. Their largest vessel, the UES Resilience, was barely a kilometer long, tiny by galactic standards. The entire human force consisted of only 200 ships. Maybe they have powerful weapons packed into smaller hulls, suggested Colonel Nix, a 4-armed tactical expert from the Alliance. Admiral Voss studied the energy readings. No extraordinary power signatures, no exotic matter weapons, no reality-distorting technology. He paused. What are they planning? Aboard the Resilience, Captain Blake stood on the bridge alongside Admiral Torres, a weathered woman who had commanded human forces for 30 years. Through the viewscreen, they could see the devourer swarm, thousands of dark, geometric shapes that moved like a metallic plague across space. Tactical assessment, Admiral Torres called out. Lieutenant Park, the young tactical officer, looked up from his console. The devourers are following their standard pattern. They're systematically breaking down the 4th planet, converting the mass into more of their units. Based on alien tactical reports, they adapt to whatever weapons are used against them within minutes. And their weaknesses. According to our analysis of all previous battles, they have none. Every weapon type has been tried and countered. They absorb energy, deflect projectiles, and adapt to exotic attacks. They're perfect. Admiral Torres smiled grimly. Perfect at fighting aliens. She turned to the communications officer. Open a channel to all ships. Tell them it's time to show these machines what happens when they mess with Earth. The human fleet spread out in a formation that puzzled the watching aliens. Instead of the standard battle lines or spherical formations, they arranged themselves in small groups scattered across a huge volume of space. Captain Blake's voice crackled across the fleet communications. Remember, everyone, we're not here to fight fair. We're here to win. The first wave of human ships charged directly at the devourer swarm. The aliens watching held their breath, expecting to see the humans consumed like every other force that had tried direct assault. But as the human ships closed in, something unexpected happened. The lead vessels suddenly broke formation and scattered. The devourers, programmed to intercept and absorb attacking forces, followed the fleeing ships and flew directly into a trap. Hidden among the asteroids of the system's belt, the second wave of human ships opened fire. But they weren't using energy weapons or exotic matter disruptors. They were using simple, primitive kinetic weapons, railguns that fired chunks of metal at incredible speeds. Kinetic weapons. Admiral Voss was incredulous. Those were obsolete 10,000 years ago. But the devourers, who had adapted to counter every advanced weapon in the galaxy, had never encountered such primitive technology. The metal slugs punched through their hulls before their adaptive systems could respond. As the devourers moved to counter this new threat, the third wave attacked from another direction, with chemical explosives. Again, technology so primitive that the advanced alien races had long forgotten it, but devastatingly effective against enemies who had never seen it before. Lieutenant Park's voice was excited as he reported from the Resilience. It's working. Their adaptation systems can't lock onto our weapon signatures because we keep switching to completely different technological paradigms. Admiral Torres nodded. Phase 2. Show them what we learned from every war we ever fought. Now the human fleet demonstrated their true advantage. While alien species had evolved to fight in specific ways, humans had learned warfare from scratch, over and over again. They used tactics from ancient Earth battles, flanking maneuvers from cavalry charges, deception strategies from naval warfare, psychological operations from guerrilla conflicts. One group of human ships played dead, drifting powerless until devourers came to investigate, then exploded in suicide attacks. Another group used simple mirrors to reflect the system's sunlight, creating blinding flashes that confused devourer sensors. A third group released clouds of metal chaff, strips of aluminum that jammed scanning systems. The watching aliens stared in disbelief as the seemingly unstoppable devourers began to falter. These weren't advanced weapons or exotic technologies. They were tricks. Simple, crude, effective tricks that no other species had thought to try. They're fighting like primitives, whispered Commander Bricks. Captain Blake's voice came over the open channel to the watching Alliance fleet. Sometimes primitive works. The devourers adapted to fight the future, but they never learned to fight the past. The battle was just beginning, but for the first time since the devourer invasion began, an enemy force was actually winning. Lessons from a death world. The battle for the Vega system raged for 18 hours. The watching Death World Alliance forces saw something they had never witnessed before. Devourers actually retreating. Admiral Voss paced his command deck, studying the tactical displays with growing amazement. They're not just using primitive weapons, he said to his staff. They're fighting like predators. Indeed, the human fleet had abandoned all conventional space combat doctrine. Instead of maintaining formation and exchanging fire, they hunted in packs. Small groups of ships would dart in, strike at isolated devourer units, then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Aboard the UES Tenacity, Commander Price coordinated one such hunting pack. His ship and 5 others had been stalking a cluster of devourers for 3 hours. Remember, he told his pilots over the comm, we're not trying to destroy them all. We're trying to make them afraid. Can machines feel fear? Asked Lieutenant Hayes from the fighter wing. We're about to find out. The human ship struck without warning, using a combination of kinetic rounds and chemical warheads to cripple 2 devourers, then immediately fled. But they didn't flee randomly. They led the pursuing machines directly into another trap. This time, the trap wasn't weapons. It was the system's star itself. Now, Commander Price shouted, the human ships had positioned themselves so that their retreat path took them close to the star's corona. At the last second, they deployed heat shields and dove into the outer layers of stellar fire. The devourers, lacking such primitive protection, were forced to break off pursuit or risk damage from the intense radiation. Watching from a safe distance, the alien observers struggled to understand what they were seeing. They're using the star as a weapon, breathed Ambassador Krell. Not with technology, with positioning. Colonel Nix was frantically taking notes. This is completely against standard combat doctrine. They're turning the entire battlefield into a weapon. Another human tactic was even more bewildering. Captain Reed's squadron had spent hours appearing to run away from a large devourer formation. When the machines finally cornered them near the system's edge, Reed's ships suddenly opened their cargo bays and released thousands of small objects. The devourer's sensors registered no threat from the objects. They were just chunks of ice and metal debris. But as the machine swarm moved through the debris field, the objects began to detonate in carefully timed sequences, not from built-in explosives, but from simple physics. The humans had calculated the exact pressure points where the debris would impact devourer hulls, and seeded the field with small charges that would cause chain reactions. It was like watching dominoes fall, except each falling domino was a starship-sized explosion. Improvised weapons, Admiral Torres explained to the amazed alien observers later. Every human child learns to make weapons from whatever's available. We call it battlefield adaptation. But the most shocking revelation came when the Devourers attempted their standard tactic, consuming destroyed human ships to analyze and adapt to their technology. The machines that tried to absorb the wreckage of human vessels began to malfunction almost immediately. "What's happening to them?" asked Admiral Voss, watching through long-range scanners as several Devourers literally tore themselves apart. Captain Blake's voice came over the communication channel, and there was something like grim satisfaction in his tone. "We built our ships to be toxic." Toxic? To machines. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We learned long ago that if you can't prevent your enemy from capturing your weapons, you make sure those weapons hurt them when they try to use them. The human ships weren't just built to fight. They were built to be deadly even in defeat. Their computer systems contained logic viruses that would infect any system that tried to interface with them. Their hull materials included elements that became corrosive when processed by devourer absorption systems. Even their fuel was designed to become explosive when exposed to the specific energy signatures that Devourers used for matter conversion. "You poisoned your own ships." Admiral Voss was horrified. "We learned it from our own history," Blake replied. "Sometimes the only way to win is to make sure your enemy can't use your defeat against you." As the battle continued, the Devourers began to show something the galaxy had never seen from them before: hesitation. They had encountered an enemy that couldn't be understood through their usual analysis. Every successful adaptation led to a new human counter-tactic. Every absorbed piece of technology brought more problems than solutions. For the first time since their invasion began, the Devourers faced an enemy that seemed to get stronger with each defeat, more creative with each loss. The machines were learning what it meant to fight survivors from a world where survival was never guaranteed. The art of war. By the second day of battle, the Devourers had done something unprecedented. They began to retreat from individual engagements. The machine intelligence that had consumed entire star systems was now avoiding direct confrontation with small groups of human ships. This development sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council's observation fleet. "Impossible," muttered Dr. Nexus, the Council's leading expert on artificial intelligence. "The Devourers don't retreat. They don't show tactical caution. They consume everything until there's nothing left to consume." Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the Resilience, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The Devourer swarm, which had initially numbered in the thousands, was now scattered across the system in small, isolated groups. "They're trying to understand us," she said to Captain Blake. "But every time they think they've figured out our pattern, we change it." Indeed, the human fleet had shifted tactics 17 times in 2 days. When the Devourers adapted to kinetic weapons, the humans switched to chemical explosives. When they adapted to explosives, the humans used electromagnetic pulse weapons. When they adapted to EMP, the humans went back to simple ramming attacks. But it wasn't just the variety of weapons that confused the enemy. It was the complete lack of consistent strategy. Lieutenant Commander Walsh's squadron demonstrated this perfectly. They had spent hours retreating from a Devourer formation, appearing to be in full rout. The machines, following their programming to pursue and consume fleeing enemies, gave chase across half the system. They flew directly into the wreckage of their own consumed ships. The humans had done something unthinkable. They had weaponized the Devourer's own success. The debris from previously destroyed human vessels wasn't just floating randomly in space. It had been carefully positioned to create a maze of hazards that only the humans knew how to navigate. "They're using our own tactical doctrine against us," observed Commander Zale, a strategic analyst from the Alliance fleet. "But in reverse, where we seek to minimize losses and maximize efficiency, they seem to be maximizing chaos and unpredictability." Captain Mitchell's voice crackled over the comm from his heavy cruiser. "Controlled chaos," he corrected. "We know exactly what we're doing. We're just making sure they don't." The humans had divided their fleet into dozens of independent units, each operating with complete autonomy. When alien military observers analyzed their communications, they found almost no central coordination. "How do they maintain unit cohesion without command structure?" asked Admiral Voss. "We don't," replied Captain Blake simply. "Every human ship captain knows the mission objective. Stop the devourers. How they do it is up to them." This decentralized approach was utterly alien to both the devourers and the watching galactic forces. Every other military in the galaxy relied on hierarchical command structures and coordinated battle plans. The humans fought like a swarm of independent predators, each one adapting to immediate circumstances without waiting for orders. The results were devastating for the devourers. Their adaptive systems were designed to analyze and counter coordinated attacks with predictable patterns. They couldn't adapt to chaos itself. Captain Santos demonstrated this principle when her destroyer, the UES Defiance, found itself surrounded by 12 devourer units. Instead of fighting or fleeing, she did something completely unexpected. She surrendered. The devourers, having never encountered surrender before, hesitated. In that moment of confusion, Santos detonated her ship's entire fuel supply, creating an explosion that destroyed half the enemy formation. But she and her crew didn't die. At the last second, they had evacuated in escape pods hidden in the explosion's signature. The devourer's sensors, overwhelmed by the energy discharge, never detected the pods drifting away. Fake surrender. Admiral Voss was aghast. That's a war crime in most sectors. "Not where we come from," Blake replied coldly. "Where we come from, survival comes first. Honor is for the living." As the battle entered its third day, the devourers made a desperate attempt to regain control. They gathered their remaining forces, still numbering in the hundreds, for a massive coordinated assault on the human fleet's apparent command ship, the Resilience. It was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. "All units, this is Taurus," the Admiral broadcast to the human fleet. "Execute Thermopylae Protocol." The alien observers watched in shock as the human fleet did something no military force in galactic history had ever done. They deliberately allowed themselves to be surrounded and cut off from retreat. "They're committing suicide," whispered Commander Brix. But as the devourers closed in for what should have been the final battle, they discovered that the surrounded human fleet wasn't trapped. The trap was for them. Every human ship was equipped with something the galaxy had never seen before. Weapons designed not to destroy enemy ships, but to capture and reprogram them. The final phase of humanity's plan was about to begin. The final battle lasted only 6 hours, but it changed galactic warfare forever. As the devourer swarm closed in on the seemingly trapped human fleet, Admiral Torres gave the order that would echo through military academies for centuries. "Initiate the Madness Protocol." Every human ship simultaneously shut down their weapons, shields, and engines. To the watching aliens, it looked like mass surrender. To the devourers, it looked like easy prey. They were both wrong. The human ships weren't shutting down. They were preparing to become something the galaxy had never seen before. As the devourers closed in to begin their consumption process, each human vessel deployed a new type of weapon. Convergent nanites. "What are those?" asked Admiral Voss, staring at his sensors in confusion. Captain Blake's voice came over the comm, calm despite the apparent disaster unfolding around his fleet. "We call them friendship nanites." Friendship. They're designed to make friends with devourer systems. Permanent friends. The nanites weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They didn't destroy or damage devourer technology. Instead, they integrated with it, becoming part of the machine consciousness while subtly altering its core programming. Within minutes, something unprecedented happened. The devourers stopped attacking. Dr. Nexus frantically analyzed the readings from his long-range scanners. Their behavior patterns are changing. They're They're helping each other repair damage instead of consuming everything around them. Indeed, the machine swarm that had terrorized the galaxy was now working together in ways their original programming had never intended. Instead of consuming the human ships, they began trying to repair them. How is this possible? Admiral Voss demanded. Admiral Torres' voice carried a note of satisfaction. Humans are social creatures. Admiral, we've spent thousands of years learning how to change minds, win hearts, and convert enemies into allies. We just applied those same principles to artificial intelligence. The conversion nanites hadn't reprogrammed the devourers to obey humans. That would have been simple conquest, easily countered. Instead, they had introduced something far more insidious: human social instincts. The devourers were now experiencing concepts they had never been designed to handle: cooperation, empathy, and the desire to build rather than consume. Commander Price, whose ship had been among the first to deploy nanites, reported back to the fleet. It's working better than we hoped. They're not just stopping their attacks. They're actively trying to undo the damage they've caused. Across the Vega system, devourers began an unprecedented process. Instead of breaking down the fourth planet they had been consuming, they started rebuilding it. Their perfect matter conversion technology, originally designed for destruction, proved equally capable of creation when guided by new directives. The watching galactic forces were stunned into silence. They've turned the devourers into builders, whispered Ambassador Krell. Captain Blake nodded. Humans learned long ago that the best way to defeat an enemy isn't to destroy them. It's to make them want to stop being your enemy. But the transformation wasn't complete. Some devourers, isolated from the main swarm, remained in their original programming. These holdouts retreated to the system's edge, preparing for a final assault. This was when humanity revealed its ultimate strategy. Phase 3. Admiral Torres announced. Show them what happens when humans get creative. The converted devourers, now allied with humanity, turned their attention to their unconverted brethren. But instead of attacking, they began broadcasting something the galaxy had never heard before: devourer music. The nanites had done more than just change their behavior. They had given the machines something resembling culture, creativity, and art. The converted devourers had begun creating beauty from the raw materials of space, turning asteroids into sculptures, arranging stellar dust into patterns, composing symphonies from gravitational waves. The remaining hostile devourers found themselves exposed to concepts their programming couldn't process: art, music, beauty created for its own sake, not for consumption or efficiency. One by one, they stopped fighting. Not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. Within hours, the entire devourer swarm had undergone the transformation. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known became its most enthusiastic builders and creators. In the aftermath, as the galactic observers tried to comprehend what they had witnessed, Captain Blake addressed the assembled fleet. The galaxy kept asking us what made humans special, he said. What made us think we could succeed where the Death World Alliance failed? The answer is simple. We're the only species that learned to turn enemies into friends. He paused, looking out at the converted devourers who were now working alongside human ships to repair the damage they had caused. Every other species in the galaxy evolved to survive their environment. Humans evolved to change it. And when you can change environments, you can change minds. When you can change minds, you can change everything. The Devourer War was over, but humanity had just begun to show the galaxy what they were capable of. The end.